This anime begins at an exhibition of Japanese calligraphy art. There, a 23-year-old man named Handa Seishu, called Handa-kun in his high school, is now a calligraphy artist and is submitting his work to an exhibition. However, a middle-aged man, the director, criticized his work and called it boring. Hearing that, he punched the director. After that, the scene moves and shows Handa, who is on a plane heading to an island. He went to the island at his father's request to calm his heart and mind. When he arrived at the island, the atmosphere seemed deserted, including at the airport. He did not even find public transportation and ended up hitching a ride with an old man driving a tractor. On the way, the old man showed Handa a beautiful sea view, then dropped him in the middle of the road because he was about to go to the fields. He walked the rest of the way and made it to the house where he would live. He saw his belongings had arrived, then asked the courier to help him load the goods, but the courier refused. Handa was confused and surprised by a man named Yujiro, the head of Nanatsurake village, where he lived. Yujiro then gave the house keys to him. After that, Handa asked not to be disturbed for a week to focus on writing calligraphy. However, he cannot open the door of his house, then Yujiro helps him and succeeds. The situation inside Handa's house looks messy, like it was inhabited by people. Apparently, 2 girls secretly hid in his house, but they ran away without being caught by him. Then, he went into the house to see the shape of the house. He looked a little doubtful about the house's condition, which was still traditional, and screamed in a panic because a rat suddenly appeared. Not only that, Handa was surprised because a girl named Naru was hiding in her house. It turned out that she made his house her headquarters. Naru is a naughty and noisy girl, so he expels her, and also Yujiro. But somehow, they managed to get back into his house and disturbed him, who was about to write calligraphy. As a result, they were kicked out again by him. When he wanted to write calligraphy again, his mind was not focused. Not long after, Naru once again managed to get into his house and is now writing along. Then, he gave up and let her come in and introduce himself to her. Naru then said that his calligraphy writing was very good and the same as her teacher's writing at school. Handa, who heard this, remembered what happened at the exhibition. He was annoyed and left her at home. The scene then shows Handa, who is looking at the ocean. He seemed to contemplate his actions until he could move to Goto Island, and he could not apologize to the director. He then starts singing, but Naru catches him, which makes him embarrassed. Naru showed her writing which imitated his writing, thus making his heart slightly accept her presence. Naru then invites Handa to take a walk by the sea, but she again irritates him, so he throws Naru into the sea, but she throws him back in, and they both enjoy swimming in the sea. There he found out that Naru was very good at swimming in a fairly deep sea because she was used to it. It was late afternoon, and Naru continued to invite him to see the sunset by climbing the beach wall. After nightfall, they decided to go home. Handa then meets the old man who gave him a ride, and it turns out that he is Naru's grandfather named Kosaku. Not long after, villagers came there who wanted to help Handa, who had just moved house. Suddenly, Yujiro explained that it was a tradition in their village. That's why the courier who delivered his goods refused to help him. Naru then introduces her friend, Hina, to Handa. Hina is a strange little girl because she always cries when she is happy or sad. Besides that, Handa is bullied by a bald-headed bad boy named Kentaro, who is Naru's friend. After that, Yujiro introduces him to a man who is the principal of a local elementary school. Shortly after, the residents helped Handa take out things and clean up his house. When it was finished, he decided to write calligraphy, and not long after, Kawafuji called Handa and asked how he was. Handa replied that he understood why his father sent him to Goto Island. He further asked Kawafuji to convey his apologies to the director. The scene changes and shows a teenage boy named Hiroshi, the son of Yujiro. He looks so disappointed and desperate because of his poor school grades, even though he feels that he has been active in studying. Yujiro and his wife seem to encourage their son not to be discouraged. Then his mother ordered Hiroshi to deliver food to Handa. Handa has lived in the village for a week, but he still can't write calligraphy according to his style. His face even looks very tired because he always stays up late. When he was about to write, suddenly he was surprised by Naru, who came along with 2 teenage girls named Miwa and Tama. They were teenage girls who had previously made his house a headquarters with Naru. Miwa and Tama then reposted the posters Handa had removed. They saw his work and said that writing calligraphy was easy. Handa was annoyed to hear this and wrote calligraphy to show them. He managed to impress them with his work. Even they asked him to teach them. Hearing that, he accepted their request but regretted it after they came home. After that, Handa was about to start writing calligraphy again, but Naru came again and invited the crybaby Hina. He was forced to allow them to accompany him when writing calligraphy. But Naru again causes trouble until she spills ink and slaps Handa because there's a mosquito. Not long after, Hiroshi came to deliver food for Handa. He looked annoyed that Handa didn't open the door. When Handa finally opened the door, he fell limp and vomited in front of Hiroshi. Naru panicked when she saw what happened to Handa and Hiroshi. After that, Hiroshi brought Handa into the house. He feels strange about Handa's condition, who is currently unconscious. Naru then explains that he is like that because he always stays up late to produce his best work. Hiroshi initially underestimated Handa and said he often stayed up late to study. Naru instead mocks him, who always gets bad grades even though he stays up all night. Then she shows Handa's room, which is filled with his works. Hiroshi is amazed by Handa's talent but keeps trying to stay up late to get the best results. While Hiroshi was still half-hearted in studying even though he had stayed up all night, the results were still not optimal. Handa's efforts made him realize his mistake. Not long after, Handa woke up, and Hiroshi said he would follow what Handa did, but Handa didn't seem to want to listen to his ramblings. The next day, Naru, who was about to play at Handa's house, was surprised when she saw Handa lying on the house's terrace. The scene changes and shows Handa being hospitalized for lack of sleep and malnutrition, and he will be hospitalized for one night. Yujiro and his wife said goodbye to go home while Naru was still accompanying him, even though Handa was annoyed with her behavior. Not long after, Miwa and Tama came to visit him. While chatting, they panicked because his IV fluid had run out. Handa even fainted from panic because of Naru's excitement. After that incident, Handa's fever increased, so the nurse advised him to do suppositories, but he refused firmly. Meanwhile, Naru seems to be hiding under his bed while holding the emergency button to call the nurse. She is afraid of the hospital ghost but wants to see the ghost. Handa, afraid of ghosts, looked panicked and covered his ears, but then Hiroshi came with his belongings. When it was late afternoon, Naru, Miwa, Tama, and Hiroshi said goodbye from the hospital. Handa, who was about to return to his inpatient room, suddenly met an old man who was a patient. The old man said those who came to visit Handa because they cared about him, thus making Handa excited even though the nurse had warned her. Finally, he was willing to perform suppository measures as suggested by the nurse. The next day, Handa was allowed to go home. He was picked up by Yujiro, his wife, and Naru. Handa said he was excited to write calligraphy again, thanks to an old man who was cared for next to his room. Yujiro and the others looked confused by his words. Yujiro continued to explain that Handa was the only patient in the hospital. He panicked and thought the old man he met yesterday was a ghost. The day changed, and Naru seemed to have grown up because she could read. Then she saw Miwa and Tama test her reading ability and succeeded. She gets a gift from them for being able to read, then she goes to meet Handa. On the other hand, Handa called Kawafuji and told him that he had sent his work to be included in the exhibition. Handa seemed confident in his work. After that, he intends to buy ink because he is out of stock. Arriving at the shop, apparently, the one guarding the shop was an old woman who helped him when he moved house. Then, he sees candy and intends to buy it as a snack for Naru and the others when they are playing at his house. The old woman shopkeeper told Naru's favorite candy. Handa, who heard it, looked embarrassed because his intention was caught by the shopkeeper. Shortly after, he took a pack of sweets randomly, but the contents turned out to be needles. As a result, the needles fell to the floor when he opened them. Inevitably, he had to clean up the needle, and soon, an old woman who wanted to go shopping came. The shopkeeper seemed to be talking with an old woman who was about to go shopping, but they didn't understand each other's intentions because of the age factor. Handa decided to help the old woman who was about to go shopping. Then when he remembered that he wanted to buy ink, suddenly Tama came and took the ink first. He finally relented because he remembered that Tama was a comic artist, and he felt that he had something in common with her, namely, expressing themselves using ink and paper. Soon after, Tama asked Handa to read her comic, which would be sent to the publisher. She said that the target readers of the comic were teenagers and asked his opinion about the comic. Handa then pulled out her comic strip, but then he put it back in because it seemed that her comic was in the horror genre, and he was terrified of scary things. Handa criticizes Tama's comics because the images are very sadistic and unsuitable for teenagers and children to read. Suddenly, she gets angry and defends her comics for various reasons. In the end, she lent Handa a variety of comics that she had collected so that he could read them and understand them. Arriving home, Hiroshi came to his house to deliver food. Besides that, he gave Handa ink that was no longer used at his house. He seemed to have guessed that Handa would not get the ink because it was being bought by schoolchildren to do their homework. On the other hand, Tama looks upset because she actually lends Handa a boys' love-themed comic, and she is afraid that he will accuse her of being fujoshi. Shortly after, Tama decides to go to his house because she feels disgusted and hates comics with the theme of boys' love and accidentally buys them. But when she arrived at his house, she saw Handa and Hiroshi hugging like in a scene in the comic Boys Love, even though Hiroshi was holding Handa, who was about to fall because he was too happy to be given ink by Hiroshi. Seeing this, Tama decides to go home with a confusing feeling and intends to continue her comic again. The next day, Handa got a call from Kawafuji, who said that his calligraphy had failed to win at the exhibition. Not long after, Naru, Miwa, and Tama came to Handa's house to invite him to play outside. However, the aura of his house felt gloomy, and apparently, Handa was sitting pensively in the corner of the room. Naru then asked what happened. Then he replied that he was frustrated because his work failed to win at the exhibition, especially since he lost to an 18-year-old boy. Hearing this, Miwa seemed to underestimate Handa just because he failed to win. Then, he was angry and said his efforts seemed in vain even though he had stayed up all night every day. He added that the goal was to move to this place so that he could grow, not decline like now. Miwa looks like she is about to scold Handa, but Tama holds her back and invites her out of the house. Now that only Naru is inside, she invites Handa to an event at the port, and in the end, he accepts her invitation. The scene shows Handa and Naru walking to the venue, where Handa sees many people carrying plastic bags, including Naru. She explained that she had brought a plastic bag to pick up the rice cakes. He looked confused and just found out that there was such an event on this island. Arriving at the port, a ship came to throw rice cakes. Kintaro is seen there, but Naru ignores him and makes him angry and runs with his rice cake, but suddenly he falls, so the rice cake falls into the sea. Miwa, Tama, and Hiroshi arrived there. Handa apologized to Miwa for the previous incident, and she forgave him. After that, Miwa invited her friends to set a strategy because they were experts who could always take a lot of rice cakes. Not long after, the rice cake distribution event began. Handa tried to take the rice cake but always lost to the others. He tried again, and a rice cake was thrown at him, but suddenly Hiroshi came and grabbed it. Handa seemed to be giving up, but another one came, and the expert seized the rice cake again. After that, Handa was met by an old lady who got a lot of rice cakes. Apparently, the old lady was one of Miwa's experts earlier. She asked about Handa's results, and he replied that he wanted to give up because he had not yet received any rice cakes. She reminded him not to just look up because there were a lot of rice cakes lying on the ground. Furthermore, she advised him not to keep looking above all the time, so he could see the opportunities from below. Handa learns an important lesson from the old lady and gets excited again to participate in the fight for the rice cakes even though, in the end, he fails and gets no rice cakes at all. After the event, Handa and his friends decided to go home. But when he got home, apparently, he got food from someone. Hiroshi then explained that the food came from the old lady who took his cake, and she always gave food to people who failed to get rice cakes. The scene changed, showing Handa writing calligraphy according to someone's order while remembering the old lady's words and becoming motivated. He wanted to check something on his computer, but it turned out his computer was broken. Then, he calls Kawafuji, but his cell phone is damaged. He can't believe it. Handa has been living on Goto Island for a month. He finds it difficult to live on Goto Island. Luckily, he can be entertained by cats in a house. Not long after, the owner of the house, a middle-aged man, came out and chased the cats away. He was annoyed because the cats got more food from his wife than his food ration. Handa just found out that the cats are stray cats and difficult for humans to touch, but there is one striped cat who obeys and wants to be carried by the middle-aged man. He was made to melt because the cat was very cute, and he wanted to join the cat, but the middle-aged man gave him a fierce cat. As a result, he was scratched by the cat. Handa then decided to go to the shop to rent a phone. Arriving at the shop, he meets Naru and Hana, playing with a boy named Aki. Naru said that Aki was good at playing retro games. Handa looked at him and thought that they were siblings and that he looked similar to Tama. After that, Aki gave the phone to Handa, but he didn't understand how to use it because it was an old phone. Aki then helps him to call Kawafuji, and the phone is connected. Handa asked Kawafuji to send him a computer, but Kawafuji refused and told him to take a break from work. Handa was so excited because he had a lot of time. After that, he paid the telephone rental fee of only 10 yen. He gave 50 yen, and the change was used to buy candy, then given to Naru and Hana. Aki was seen laughing because of his pleasant attitude. Aki said he would like to play at Handa's house sometime, and Handa allowed him. The scene changed, showing Handa lying in the living room of his house with scattered papers. He apparently still can't write his best calligraphy and feels that the writing he has made has been bad. He decided to take a walk to the seafront and think of a plan while walking with his eyes closed. Suddenly he tripped over a box containing seaweed and fell apart. Seeing this, the man who owned the box was angry, but the man suddenly fell silent as if he recognized Handa. When he discovered Handa was a calligraphy artist, the man took him to the port and asked him to write calligraphy on his ship. Apparently, the man was Miwa's father, and his name was Iwao. Handa was confused because this was his first time writing on a ship, so he wanted to go home first and make a printout of his writing on paper. However, Iwao was angry and wanted the ship to be written directly and not in print, but Handa still refused for fear of bad results. Mr. Iwao thought that Handa was unprofessional and said that someone else judged him bad or not himself. However, Handa did not accept it, and they seemed to be arguing. Seeing that, Miwa separated them and took her father away while asking Handa to work on it. Handa was already annoyed with Iwao and determined to make Iwao impressed by his writing. He initially wrote on wooden boards to warm up. Only then did he prepare to write on the boat. However, when he realized the ship's hull was convex and uneven, Handa stopped. When he was about to start again, his hands shook, and he was still afraid of the outcome. Naru, who was already excited, put his ink-smeared hand on the ship. Her other friends followed suit and made Handa panicked and annoyed. In the end, Handa put his brush on the boat and started writing. He started to enjoy his work because he saw Naru, who easily put her hands together without a burden. His work was finished, and Iwao liked his writing very much, then gave him some seaweed. Not long after, Iwao again angrily at Handa for scribbling on a wooden board. Then, he ran away, followed by Naru and her friends. The next day, Handa still remembers yesterday's events and feels happy because he managed to write on the ship. It makes him more confident in his abilities. Not long after, Kosaku appears at his house and gives Handa a dish called konomon. He says he will give it again when it's finished. At first, Handa was not sure that the konomon would be finished by him alone, but when he tasted it, he became addicted because it tasted good and affected his mood in writing. Unknowingly, Handa spent konomon, thus making him wait for someone to come to give konomon to him. Not long after, Tama, Miwa, and Naru came to his house, but he looked disappointed because it wasn't Kosaku. It turned out that they learned to write calligraphy, while Naru came to ask Handa for help to do her schoolwork. At first, he refused to help Naru, but apparently, she brought konomon. Seeing that, he was happy. After that, Handa taught the three of them to write calligraphy, but Miwa asked him to teach her how to write, resulting in the work in his room. However, he refused and explained that if the work was a winner, he would teach them. They learned calligraphy and were taught by Handa until they were all exhausted, but he underestimated them because he forgot the time he was focusing on writing calligraphy. This made Miwa and Tama look annoyed. Miwa told Handa to buy a drink while she rested. After that, she seemed to find out about Handa's origins. She wondered whether he had a lover or not. She found a photo of Handa with some people who didn't look suspicious. Suddenly, Naru gave a box to Miwa and Tama. Naru said that the box was Handa's treasure. Miwa had already guessed that the box's contents must be a photo of Handa's girlfriend. But, when she opened it, it was a historical figure, making Tama and Miwa disappointed. Handa, who had just arrived, was scolded by them because they were disappointed in Handa, who was single even though he was 23 years old. The next day, Handa was seen watering sunflowers in his yard. Not long after, Yujiro comes with his kids and wants Handa to go to the beach with them and watch over them. Yujiro said it was actually the principal's job, but he was busy now. Yujiro said that Tama, Miwa, and Hiroshi would come, and Handa accepted the offer. Shortly after, Handa met Tama and Miwa, who were actually wearing sports clothes. He felt strange with the style of their clothes even though they were going to the beach. At the same time, Hiroshi appeared wearing complete diving equipment. He guided the children with enthusiasm. Arriving at the beach, Naru and the other children ran first while Handa slipped and fainted. The scene seems to show Naru, Hina, and the other children having fun playing in the water, as well as Tama and Miwa, while Hiroshi shows his skills to Kentaro in catching the octopus. As time passes, Tama looks tired from playing with the children, so she takes a break, and at the same time, Handa wakes up. She asked about Hiroshi to Handa, because Tama was still thinking about a scene like the comic boys' love between Hiroshi and Handa the other day. Handa thinks that Tama likes Hiroshi, so he tells her good things about Hiroshi. This actually makes her feel confused and angry at him. Tama intends to go, and Handa intends to chase her but instead falls and faints again. She came back again and accompanied him. On the other hand, Miwa shows a sea cucumber to Naru and Hana, saying that if Naru dares to hold it, it means Naru is an adult. She then gave the sea cucumber to Naru, who dared to hold it without feeling disgusted. After that, Handa woke up and checked the clock, and it was time to go home. He took the children home, but he did not see them. Soon after, Tama informed their whereabouts. The three of them apparently jumped into the sea from a high place. When it was Naru's turn to jump, Handa panicked and intended to stop her, but he slipped again and fainted again. After that, Hiroshi, Miwa, and Naru looked home with a bump on their head because Handa scolded them. He said that this was the first time he was worried about them. Hearing that, Naru hugged Handa and apologized, as did Tama, Miwa, and the other children. After that, they decided to have lunch at Handa's house and continued with a nap. Not long after, Handa got a phone call from Kawafuji, but it went unanswered. Kawafuji was on the way to Goto Island, and his cell phone was starting to lose signal. He came along with a teenage boy named Kosuke, who is a big fan of Handa. The scene then shows Naru trading shells in front of the house. Not long after, Kawafuji and Kosuke stopped in front of her house. Naru, who saw the tattooed Kawafuji, was scared and ran inside, then came back out by showing the fake tattoo to Kawafuji. After that, he asked Naru where Handa was, but she pretended not to know, thinking that he was a bad person. She then offered the shells she had sold to him and promised to give information about Handa if he wanted to buy the shells. Kawafuji chose one of the brightest shells, but Naru said it was only for the rich. He then took out a card that amazed her, but he pulled her when she was about to tell the card to her grandfather. Suddenly, Kawafuji is surrounded by residents who suspect he is a child kidnapper. In the evening, Naru and Hiroshi have dinner at Handa's house because there is a meeting in the village. After all, a kidnapper almost kidnapped Naru. Handa said that his friend would be visiting, then asked if the person she met had an eagle tattoo on his arm, but she was reluctant to answer. Not long after, Miwa came and told Handa that his friend had come to visit. They are Kawafuji and Kosuke, who arrived drunk after being asked to drink by the residents after being interrogated. There, Kawafuji said that he was very worried about Handa. Hearing that, he was carried away and wanted to hug Kawafuji, but Kawafuji beat him because Handa didn't pick up the phone from him earlier. After that, they had dinner together. Miwa seemed to eat voraciously and asked for more konomon, so Handa went to get it. Kosuke introduced himself and took out his business card. He is a calligrapher like Handa, especially Kosuke is a big fan of Handa. It turned out that Kosuke sent his work to the same exhibition as Handa. Miwa was suspicious because Kosuke was 18 years old, and her guess was right. Kosuke was the winner of the exhibition that Handa participated in, thus making him frustrated because he lost to an 18-year-old boy who is now in his house. Miwa and Hiroshi seemed to be whispering. They didn't know what Kosuke was here for, and finally, they decided to make Handa not know who he really was. After that, Miwa took Kosuke home, forbidding him not to stay at Handa's house. Naru then gave the ball to Kosuke, which turned out to be filled with insects. He was scared and threw the ball until it broke and made the insects fly. Moreover, the insects emit a bad smell, so they must catch them using a bottle. After that, Kawafuji and Kosuke returned to the tent they had set up, making Hiroshi and Miwa feel calm. However, Handa already knew that Kosuke was the winner in the exhibition the other day. He seemed a little jealous but chose to catch the insects in his house. The next day, Kosuke visits Handa again. Kosuke apparently is a fan of his, even to the point of buying books with his name. Kosuke continued explaining Handa's words in one of the books, so he was embarrassed and tore up the book. Kosuke got angry because of that. Then he asked why Handa was spending time in a remote place, even though Kosuke wanted to ask his opinion and saw Handa write calligraphy. Not only that, Kosuke invites him to return to Tokyo, and he looks surprised to hear that. On the other hand, Kawafuji looked dizzy and sat on the beach. Not long after, Miwa and Hiroshi went to him to apologize for yesterday's incident. Miwa was surprised when she found out that Kosuke was at Handa's house, even though she wanted to leave a message to tell him not to speak strange things to Handa. But he told her not to worry too much about Handa. He knows Handa's attitude well because they have been friends since junior high school. He admits that Handa is bad at interacting and needs a support figure. He asked Miwa and Hiroshi to look after Handa a little longer because Handa had become a source of income for him. On the other hand, Kosuke still scolds Handa and says that his abilities have decreased due to living in a remote place. Even Kosuke called Handa bad for losing to him at the exhibition yesterday. Handa, who was fed up, shouted and asked him to stop babbling. But suddenly, Naru appears on the house's roof and throws a toy plane from Kosuke's paper. Seeing this, Handa was sure to stay there and told him to go first, but he still insisted that Handa kicked him until he passed out. Handa then took Kosuke to Hiroshi's house. Although Hiroshi felt uncomfortable but not with his mother showed the book about Handa that Naru distributed to the villagers. Handa, who saw it, was very embarrassed, especially Hiroshi's mother said that she had just found out that he was a famous person. She asked for his autograph, but because the book had already been distributed, all the villagers came to ask for his signature. Shortly after, Miwa came and asked for his autograph while making fun of him with the words he wrote in the book. The next day, Handa takes Kawafuji and Kosuke to go fishing. Kawafuji said that today was his last day here because his time was wasted searching for Handa's house. He said that the last day should have been a visit to a tourist spot, but Miwa said that there was no tourist spot on the island, so they decided to go fishing. While Hiroshi still looks sleepy because he can't sleep because he hears Kosuke talking all night long. Miwa then teaches Kawafuji and Kosuke how to fish, while Hiroshi chooses to fish separately for bigger fish. Miwa practiced the method and got the fish. It made Handa, Kawafuji, and Kosuke excited to try. Handa seemed to have managed to catch a fish, and so did Kawafuji. It was Kosuke's turn, which looked heavy pulling his fishing rod. That boy was sure that he would get a big fish, but apparently, his fishing rod was stuck on a rock. On the other hand, Naru and Hana looked cool playing with cockroaches. Naru, who is naughty, catches a cockroach and scares Hina. They ran to each other until they hit Kosuke and scared him to tears. Kosuke whines that he wants to go home and see Handa write calligraphy, but he refuses because Kosuke had said it sucks. Kawafuji is angry to hear Kosuke had said that to Handa. He said that even Kosuke could win because he imitated the last Handa style he made before Handa changed his style. Kawafuji continued to explain that what is considered rigid may be his style, which imitates his father's style, while Kosuke's style imitates Handa's style, so his works are not original. Kawafuji emphasized that Handa must have his own original style. Hina then showed off the hook she had made to Handa, Kawafuji, and Kosuke. Naru did not want to lose and showed off her new breakthrough hook. But Kosuke laughed at her, and Naru was angry and pushed him, Kawafuji, and Handa into the sea. Soon after, everyone met Hiroshi, who had not got the big fish. Naru offered her homemade hook to him, and he tried it. Until late afternoon, he did not get any fish and was prepared to go home. Then, he gave his fishing rod to Kosuke, and when Kosuke held it, the fishing rod was felt. Kawafuji and Handa helped Kosuke pull the fishing rod, but unfortunately, the fish slipped and the fishing hook fell. They decided to go home, but Handa thought for a moment and realized that while on Goto Island, he was always passionate about writing calligraphy and his hands shook. Kosuke apparently felt the same way, even though he had only been there a few days. Arriving home, Handa decided to write calligraphy. After that, they had dinner together, but a fish was covered in ink on the dining table. It turned out that the fish was used as a brush by him to write calligraphy. The next day, Kawafuji and Kosuke were ready to go home. Still, he was ignored by Handa and the others because they were busy looking for souvenirs for Kawafuji and Kosuke to bring. Not long after, Yujiro advised Kawafuji to bring souvenirs, explaining that looking for souvenirs is natural for villagers. Seeing Kosuke, who was confused when buying souvenirs, Hiroshi suggested buying a keychain for his friend. Still, because he had no friends, Hiroshi and Kosuke finally bought and exchanged the same keychain. On the other hand, Naru looks excited, asking to buy a mask as a gift for Kawafuji. When the departure arrived, Kawafuji said goodbye to Handa while telling him to call his father because his father must miss him. When Kawafuji entered the examination door, the door rang, and it seemed that Miwa and Hiroshi were pranking Kawafuji. Soon after, Kosuke said goodbye to Handa and said he would go back there again, but he was bullied by Miwa and Hiroshi and even laughed out loud. Naru, who laughed along, forgot to give him a gift from her grandfather, so she ran to him. After that, Hiroshi and Miwa said goodbye to Kawafuji from outside and said he might go to Tokyo to continue his education. Naru came but fell and made the drink she was carrying spilled on Hiroshi's clothes. After that, Hiroshi and Miwa were left by Yujiro, Handa, Naru, and Hana with the excuse that the car was full. The scene changes and shows Handa remembering Kawafuji's suggestion to create his unique style. He tried various objects to use as his brush for writing. Suddenly, Miwa and Tama tell Handa that Naru's birthday is coming soon. They both then asked him for money to buy a birthday cake and a gift, then they left. He looked confused about what gift to give to Naru, but suddenly he heard the sound of crickets and got an idea. Knowing that Naru likes insects, he meets Kentaro, who catches beetles with his friends. He asked for the beetle but was refused. Shortly after, Handa went looking for the stag beetle because Naru really liked the stag beetle. He initially had trouble finding the stag beetle and instead got another beetle. But Kentaro finds a stag beetle and intends to catch it. However, Kentaro failed to get the beetle because it was too high. Handa came with a ladder, but he was hesitant to catch the beetle with his bare hands and wanted to borrow Kentaro's net. Without realizing it, the stag beetle flew to Handa's cheek and stung him until he fell, while the beetle flew away. Not long after, Kentaro found another beetle, the Hercules beetle. He was about to take it himself but asked Handa to take it. Handa was initially scared, but he managed to catch it. But he fell and killed the beetle. Kentaro was crying because the beetle that was the gift for Naru died. Then they buried the beetle. He then gave a stag beetle that he got earlier to Handa. But Handa couldn't hold the beetle, and his fingers were squeezed, so the beetle ran away again. Handa decides to go home empty-handed, but he is confused that his house has been decorated in such a way and is confused as to why Miwa and the others can enter his house. Apparently, she had 5 duplicate keys, but she said that one key was lost in the mountain behind Handa's house. On the other hand, Handa was still confused about what gift to give, while Tama gave a gift of peacock feathers, while Miwa gave a bubble wrap. Seeing this, Handa had an idea for a gift. Soon Hina appeared and said that Naru was about to arrive. They were ready to surprise her, but Handa suddenly sneezed and failed to surprise her. Even so, Naru still looks happy, especially when Handa gives him a gift as a one-time request coupon. The next day, Naru invites Handa to use the coupon to go on a pilgrimage, and he wants to accompany her. Then, they meet Naru's grandfather, Kosaku. It turned out that Kosaku was about to go to the field, so he asked Handa to accompany Naru. Afterward, Handa prays with Naru, but suddenly the sound of fireworks appears, along with a parachute that lands on them. Not long after, Miwa appeared and pushed Handa away. Long story short, Handa said that the townspeople do not use lanterns on pilgrimage. Handa just found out that an event called Onde was held while on a pilgrimage. Onde is at a dance performance in front of the tomb, and Handa looks happy to see it. But the last dancer stops in front of him, and the dancer is Hiroshi. It was getting late, and many people came to the sparkling cemetery with lanterns. There, Handa realizes that he has never seen Naru's parents, who Naru is apparently an orphan and only live with her grandfather. But she looks very cheerful and doesn't seem lonely. After the festival, he continued to accompany her to her grandmother's grave until Kosaku came, so she was very happy. The scene then changes, showing Handa angry because he has not yet received the inspiration to write his best calligraphy, even though the time for the next exhibition is only 2 weeks away. Handa then decided to shower to refresh his body and mind, but the water heater in his bathroom was broken. Not long after, Yujiro came to fix the heater and said it would take a week to repair. He advised Handa to use the stove and take the wood to burn in the mountain behind his house. Yujiro invited him to look for wood. Even though he looked like he couldn't help it, Handa still went with Yujiro. Handa will use the stove for a week until the water heater is repaired. On the other hand, when they see smoke coming from Handa's house, Tama and Miwa feel suspicious, as well as Naru, who comes hysterically to his house because she thinks it is on fire. After that, Naru admits she is used to guarding the fire with her grandfather. She offers to keep the fire waiting while Handa can go take a shower. He believed then began to soak in hot water from the stove, and it felt comfortable. Suddenly Handa was surprised by Tama and Miwa. They wanted to peek at him, especially Tama wanted to take a picture of his body for inspiration for her comic, but he closed the window. Also, they deliberately raised the fire so that it was too hot, especially since Naru ran away and didn't keep the fire. After bathing, Handa was surprised by Hiroshi, who was in his kitchen. Hiroshi apparently wanted to cook for Handa because his mother was not at home. He wants to learn to cook and help Hiroshi, but he doesn't understand even though he has been taught by Hiroshi. After their homemade dishes were ready, they exchanged the food they made with each other. Of course, Handa was happy because Hiroshi's food was delicious, but Hiroshi was the opposite because Handa's food tasted weird. Not long after, Hina came to Handa's house and looked tired from running. He asks her what happened. She then complains that Naru is beaten by a boy from the next village. Hearing this, Hiroshi and Handa ordered her to take them to where Naru was. Apparently, what happened to Naru was not what they had imagined. Handa, who had just arrived, was insulted by the boys who teased her. He ordered the boys to leave their village, but they refused and beat him. Soon after, Hiroshi tried to persuade the boys, but he got angry because he was told to kneel in front of the boys. Handa threatened the boys that he would report them to the police, but they hit his cell phone until it fell on feces. He was angry because his cell phone was broken and dirty, but Hiroshi laughed out loud, seeing what had happened to him. Not long after, they intended to torture the boys secretly through the catch ball game. Handa was annoyed that he deliberately threw the ball at them. Hiroshi managed to throw it right on their heads, but they managed to avenge their actions. Not long after, Aki passed by and saw Handa and Hiroshi playing with the boys, but Aki's presence made the boys choose to play with him. After that, they went home, but in the middle of the road, Naru invited Handa to play Tarzan. Handa, who had imagined that the game would be fun, decided to go with her, but it turned out that the game had to hang on the river. He refuses, but Naru shows him the way, forces him to try it, and says he is a coward. Handa, annoyed, wants to break the rope, but Naru and her friends try to restrain him. On the other hand, Hina was angry at his actions. Then, she pushed him into the river. It was already evening, but Handa still couldn't make his hands able to write calligraphy. But when he saw a beautiful sunset, his hands shook and he got inspired. At first, Naru and her friends didn't pay much attention to Handa and thought that he had taken another way, but Naru panicked when she found out that Handa had not yet returned home. On the other hand, Handa tried climbing a cliff, but suddenly, a caterpillar in his hand scared him, falling again when he was almost there. He was frustrated and started to get scared because it was already night and dark. He suddenly saw the light, and then he approached it, and apparently, it was the key to the house that Miwa had said. It makes him feel happy and relieved. Shortly after, Handa was sleeping on the grass, looking at the stars shining brightly. Suddenly, there was a shooting star, and he made a wish. Soon after, Miwa, Tama, and Naru found him and took him home. The scene changes and shows Handa, who looks enthusiastic and is ready to write his calligraphy. He was so serious about writing inspired by the stars he saw earlier, even ignoring Yujiro, who came to visit. The next day, Handa appears at Aki's shop accompanied by Hina and Naru. Then, he called Kawafuji to inform him that he had sent his work for the exhibition. Handa said he got a lot of inspiration and motivation during his stay here. On the other hand, Kawafuji was entertaining the director, who visited his office, so he couldn't reply to Handa's words on the phone. The director asked how Handa was doing while waiting for him to send his work, especially the director's hopes that Handa would return to Tokyo. The scene returned to Handa. There, he was seen walking with Naru and apparently still had doubts about his work. He wonders whether his work is truly his signature or is it just a work that gets carried away by the atmosphere on the island. Naru then invites him to catch a frog, and he refuses, but she takes out his coupon so that he can't help but obey. Soon after, Naru and Handa met with Kosaku, making the embankment. Kosaku asked Handa to help him, but Naru refused because she used a coupon to ask Handa to play. However, the coupon was taken by her grandfather. Because of that, Handa wanted to help Kosaku. When finished, Kosaku invites Naru and Handa to go to the temple, then shows the nameplate of the donors at the shrine, which is located above the temple door. He asked Handa to help rewrite the names of the donors on the new board. He asked to write Handa's name on the board, but Handa refused because he was not a donor but Kosaku. Then, Kosaku gave permission to write Handa's name. When they were about to go home and write, Handa and Naru were met by Aki, Kintaro, and Hina. Suddenly, Aki told Handa that he had gotten a call from Kawafuji. Afterward, Handa ordered Naru and her friends to bring the temple nameplate to his house while Handa went to Aki's shop to call back Kawafuji. While going to Handa's house, Naru told her friends that her grandfather had broken the birthday coupon Handa gave her. Deep down, she really wanted to do something with him using the coupon. On the other hand, Handa seems to have received news that made him say he would be home tomorrow. The scene changes and shows Handa, who sees the calligraphy writing of Tama and Miwa and says that their writing skills have developed. They still don't seem confident in their writing, just as Handa is unsure of his writing. Not long after, Hina and Naru came to invite Handa to go to the festival. Handa then dressed Hina and Naru in kimonos while Miwa and Tama said goodbye because they wanted to go to the festival. After that, they went there. Handa looked happy when he arrived at the festival. After all, he had never been to a festival because he was always required to learn calligraphy since childhood. Then, Naru invited him to catch goldfish. He was enthusiastic to hear her invitation, but apparently, he was not good at catching carp. Not long after, the nurse who used to take care of Handa at the hospital appeared. She was very good at catching goldfish, but suddenly she was hit by a boy, so the goldfish she caught fell into the pond again. The day turned night, and Naru invited Handa to play basketball 4 versus 4. Aki is there and forms a team with the boys, and the opponents are the junior high school kids Miwa and her friends, but they are missing one person because Tama is buying a comic book. The match started. They managed to get all the balls into the ring, then Miwa and her friends' turn. They also managed to put all the balls into the ring. Soon after, Handa was told to throw the ball because Tama didn't come. However, Handa failed to get the ball in, thus making his team lose. Even so, Miwa gave him 300 yen as the prize money for the second place. Then he used the money to treat Hina and Naru to buy sweets. However, the two little girls asked for other snacks that cost more than 300 yen, and apparently, Hina and Naru had a lot of money, but Handa still bought them cotton candy because it was also the first time he had eaten cotton candy. After that, the fireworks started. The scene showed Naru and Hina dancing with the dancers while Handa looked panicked because he was separated from the two little girls, even though he had just reminded them not to go far from him. He looks for them but instead meets Tama, who is reading a comic in a small dark alley. Then, she takes him to the beach, and it turns out that Naru and Hina are with Miwa. Miwa said that she was left by her friends to go on a date not long after Hiroshi came to meet Handa and the others. Hiroshi said he intends to work to fill his summer vacation. But Hiroshi felt bad because if he worked, it would be quiet. Miwa then said that Handa still accompanied them to play with Naru. But Handa seemed a little nervous, and when he was about to say something, fireworks erupted in the air so that he didn't continue to speak. Everyone seemed to enjoy the fireworks display, but Hiroshi was still curious about what Handa wanted to say earlier. The next morning, Handa is seen locking the door and preparing to go to the airport. Then, in the afternoon, Naru comes to his house, but the door is locked. When she enters through a secret passage, she finds his house empty. On the other hand, Handa seemed to have arrived in Tokyo and was waiting for the train to Kawafuji's office. When they arrived, his work had already arrived, but Handa was still nervous when he met the director. Meanwhile, Kawafuji said that his work was good and different from before, but he again wasn't sure if it was an original work that suited his style. The director came shortly after, and Handa looked nervous about welcoming him. He then helped the director sit down and realized that he had made a mistake by punching the director. He bowed and apologized to the director for the mistake. Fortunately, he forgives Handa, which makes Handa feel relieved. The director advised Handa not to be rash and get emotional easily. After that, he wanted to see Handa's work up close, so Handa helped him. Handa looked nervous and afraid that he would again criticize his work. When the director was about to speak, suddenly, Handa spilled coffee on the piece, and accidentally on the director too. Seeing that, Kawafuji laughed. Handa said it was just his practice, not for the exhibition. It turned out that the director praised Handa's work. Even though his writing was like that of an elementary school child, it was still beautiful and like stars. Handa admitted that it resulted from his training while living on Goto Island. Then, the director will wait for his even better work. Soon afterward, the director said goodbye and was escorted by Kawafuji. Apparently, the director came with Handa's father in his old car, which was breaking down. Then, Kawafuji returned to his office and found Handa, who was desperate and wanted to return to Goto Island. The next day, Kawafuji came to Handa's house, but he still locked himself in because he was frustrated that he couldn't write anymore. An annoyed Kawafuji was about to go home but was restrained by Handa. Handa seemed to tie his hair like Naru to get inspiration but failed. Kawafuji advised him not to rush and write as usual, and suddenly, he got an idea. The scene shows Handa's mother delivering tea to Kawafuji and Kosuke. But, when his mother opens the door, she is surprised to see Kawafuji and Kosuke tied up by Handa. This made her misunderstood. She felt that her child was not like before, and she cried. Handa was again frustrated and wanted to return to Goto Island but was rejected by Kawafuji. He insists on returning to Goto Island and says it is a big step in his calligraphy career. Kawafuji then gave Handa his cell phone, which was calling someone, and said that this was the only way. Apparently, Kawafuji was calling Aki, and Naru picked up. Suddenly, Miwa took the phone, and they scrambled to talk to Handa and ask how he was. They know from Kawafuji that Handa needs inspiration. Handa then complains to Aki. Suddenly, Aki tells him that Naru is very lonely without him there. Also, Aki said that he and the people in Goto were waiting for him to return. Hearing this, Handa became excited and got inspiration. He took out a list of donors previously given by Kosaku. He told Kosuke and Kawafuji to go get the things they needed. On the other hand, Handa's mother is still worried about him, but Handa's father says that this is their fault because they have always restrained him since he was little, even though their job is only to supervise and let him choose what he likes. The next day, Kawafuji and Kosuke were woken up by Handa, who had finished writing his best calligraphy all night long. On the other hand, Tama and Miwa take part in a calligraphy competition at their school and seem confident that their work will win. The scene then moves and shows Miwa telling Naru and her friends that Handa will be back soon. She tells them to clean up Handa's messy house. It turned out that Miwa was lying because she still didn't know when Handa would go back. And when cleaning Handa's house, Naru is seen asking when Handa will return. Meanwhile, Handa's mother did not allow him to return to Goto Island, even though he had finished doing work for the exhibition. Not long after, his father came with Kawafuji, who gave the news that his work had arrived at the exhibition. Then his parent asked Handa to talk. There, his mother forbade him to return to Goto Island for fear of seeing his change, and Kawafuji supported her decision. Handa then expressed his opinion and said that the association there was very suitable for him because he was not sociable and did not have friends in Tokyo. His mother accuses him of being friends with strange people on Goto Island and still forbids him to return there. Handa's father told Handa about Goto Island and said that when he was Handa's age, he had lived on Goto Island and was friends with Yujiro. After that, Kawafuji, Handa, and his father even talked about life on Goto Island and ignored his mother. She was angry and explained her worries about Handa. Suddenly, Kawafuji commented something that made her beat him up. Finally, his father gave Handa a choice to return to Goto Island to get exceptional work that suits his style and then return to Tokyo or stay in Tokyo forever. After that, Handa was in the room with Kawafuji. There Kawafuji advised him to stay in Tokyo, while he thought not to rush back to Goto Island. Not long after, his mother brought a package for her son, who apparently came from Goto Island. She had bad thoughts, but it turned out that the contents were only snacks and toys from the children on Goto Island. In the box, there were the results of Miwa and Tama's calligraphy during their practice with Handa. Seeing this, Handa's mother's heart was touched, and she finally allowed him to return to the island. She then met her husband and decided to let Handa go because he could grow up not because of his calligraphy but the people on Goto Island. His father also agreed to her wish and offered her to go there. Meanwhile, Miwa informs Naru and her friends that Handa will be back this afternoon, then orders them to clean up his house again. On the other hand, Hiroshi was looking to fix the windows of Handa's house in preparation for winter. When they got there, he seemed annoyed that Miwa and Tama were playing with the little ones and didn't clean up Handa's house. He then invited them all to clean up together. Elsewhere, Handa had returned to Goto Island and decided to walk while waiting for Yujiro to pick him up. At the same time, the exhibition was being held, and Handa's father was talking with the director about Handa's work, which seems to have a promising future. However, something made his father worried when he remembered that Handa liked to follow his instincts. Back on Goto Island, Handa looked exhausted because no one came to pick him up. He saw the vending machine and bought a drink. The scene shows Handa following his instincts but ends badly because he bought the wrong drink. Not long after, Kosaku appears and offers Handa a ride. Handa says this is like the first time they met, but this time his heart is happy and not as upset as the first time. Meanwhile, Aki gets a call from Kawafuji asking for Handa. Coincidentally, Handa just got there and finally calls Kawafuji first before returning home. After that, Aki went to his house to bring his things. Aki said that Handa and Kawafuji might discuss the exhibition results that Handa participated in. Not long after, Kintaro came and told him that Handa had arrived. Miwa and the others got ready to welcome his return. Then when he opened the door, they bumped into Handa because it was too exciting, especially Naru, who missed him the most. She then asked about his exhibition results, and Handa replied that he was happy with the results. On the other hand, Kosuke looked dispirited as his ranking dropped considerably in this exhibition, even below Handa, who was in 5th place. Not long after, Handa's father came and asked Kawafuji about Handa. Kawafuji said that he had informed Handa over the phone. Kawafuji said this was the beginning of Handa's search for original works that matched his style. On the other hand, Handa and his friends had dinner to celebrate his return. Soon after, Miwa asked what Handa wrote in his calligraphy work, and he replied that he wrote the names of people on Goto Island who were so precious to him. Then, Naru told him to always have fun with the result. This is the end of the anime. The moral message that can be learned from this anime is that we must always believe in our own abilities and never give up on doing something. Like Handa, who initially hesitated and gave up easily, he did not even accept the reality. But slowly, he believed in himself and continued to be passionate about writing calligraphy, thanks to the lessons he learned while living on Goto Island.